We're hearing a lot about harmonisation, the theme of this conference. Do you think the current initiatives, things like T2S, EPTG, the various regulatory moves by the EU, will bring us to a single securities market in the EU?
I think over a period of time, it's a question of trends. And certainly it's very clear where the regulators and politicians want the trends to go. Harmonisation clearly has got some good sides to it. But I think there's some key challenges. Not the least that you're dealing with, the Eurozone countries, but there's also very important markets within the European area which are not Eurozone, and that therein lies some challenges, I think.
It is going to be very hard, isn't it, to harmonise the regulations that affect everyone. Mr. Barnier talks about a single rule book, for instance. Well, I don't think that the UK government necessarily sees that as being a particularly good thing for the City of London.
City of London, I think, is probably a subject apart, because you're dealing with global markets, and I think the focus certainly of this conference has been, the European markets, and I think that the global agenda is definitely there, and deserves, a great deal of thought in terms of the consequence of the trends that we're going through. I think the real challenges actually lie in looking at the entire value chain, because it's easy enough to have a common rule book that binds participants who are used to operating fundamentally in markets which are governed by rules. And obviously going through the trading, the clearing, the settlement, there's a common interest in having a code of conduct and a set of agreed procedures and processes that we all adopt. Is when you go outside that cosy little community and start looking at the consumers and providers of capital, the issuers and the investors, and I think some of the discussion this morning that explicitly included the investor was a very good inclusion. And I think what I'd be looking to do is to include the issuers as well, who at the end of the day are the consumers of capital.
This is something which everyone is in together, isn't it? All the issuers, the consumers, the investors, everybody.
It's the capital market, yes. And it is a market, and it is about capital. And what we're talking about is part of the machinery that brings that together. Now, a common framework, a common rule book, harmonisation, what that does is create an expanded community. And that's a market structure that people can recognise and understand. The fact that it begins to overtake the geographical concentration, which I think has been one of the barriers of markets up until now, has to be a good thing.
How do you feel that the CSDs, CCPs, various intermediaries will react in this new securities landscape we hopefully will end up with in 2015?
Well, it comes back to my point about the previous geographic orientation of the markets. Somebody said this morning that if you're a country, you have an airline, you have a stock exchange, and you have a CSD. Now that explicitly is what the regulators are going after. Cross-border competition will probably mean that there will be fewer CSDs than there were before. Now, obviously, I represent the product of the need for competition, and we are a new entrant into that market, and we've done so for very good and very well researched purposes and objectives. Will
the CSDs and the other intermediaries remain local, or will they become more regional or European, even global?
I think remaining local, unless you're lucky enough to have discovered a very profitable niche, I think going local is not an option. It has to be a regional approach, which is where the competition caused by the regulation will happen, very much on a regional basis.
Looking ahead, how do you expect the CSD market to look 10 years from now? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what would you expect to come from it after the T2S?
Well, certainly our approach, our assumptions has been that in the short run there's going to be more CSDs. The existing incumbents will hang on, they'll find other things to do within their allotted niches. But I think after the introduction of something like T2S, I think you're going to see a contraction of the supply of individual CSDs.
Just finally, the new man has just taken over from Jean-Claude Juncker as head of the Euro group. From the market perspective, what would be your advice to this new man stepping into very difficult shoes to fill?
I think one would have to say, if one could be allowed, is remember there's a balance between safe markets and commercially successful ones.